I'm here to talk about the solution for Everglades Restoration. And it's really not that complicated when you look at it from kind of a 30,000 foot view. And that's what I'm going to try to do, is talk about this not as an engineer and computer model, but just sort of our modeler, but kind of point out the obvious. To understand how to fix it, you first have to understand how it worked, and then what we did to change it, because the basic recipe for restoration is to try to put it back more like the way it used to work than it does today. Now, there's a long story of water management changes in South Florida. We have a water management system. Yes, there is rain, but once the water hits the ground, today it very much depends upon where the water managers want it to go. Now, there's been a number of things that happened about 1920s. The Corps of Engineers dug a canal from Fort Myers over to Stewart, primarily because the railroad was over here, and Fort Myers wanted access to the railroad, so they dug the canal. About that same time, they finished the Tamiami Trail, and now they didn't, this canal was, the Okeechobee Waterway was really never used. What happened was in 1928, there was a major hurricane that ripped through, came ashore at West Palm Beach, picked up Lake Okeechobee, dropped it on Belle Glade, killing thousands. Still one of the worst natural disasters in our country. The outcry from that was absolutely devastating. The aftermath were pictures like this, the internet of the day, of massive devastation and bodies in the streets, coffins stacked up and funeral pyres, 2,500 lives lost. So the President-elect Herbert Hoover ordered the Corps to help. And the Corps responded by building a dike around Lake Okeechobee. That changed everything. Every other attempt to kind of deal with the Everglades really didn't do anything. But that changed everything, because before, the lake would empty southward into the Everglades. And the St. Lucie and Caloosahatchee River, while they did get some flow from this canal, really not that much. But once they built the dike around the lake, there was nowhere for that water to go. Now that created a lot of problems for the estuaries. You've heard Commissioner Hurd say the headlines from the 1930s were this freshwater release from the lake was causing problems. Exactly, it's been here that long since they finished that dike. But it had problems further south too. The Everglades was now starved for water. What happened then was they built a series, the Corps came in and said, you know, that instead of the Everglades is always drying up, we'll build a series of lakes and dams in the Everglades. And besides that, we'll take the area south of Lake Okeechobee and turn that into a farming area to raise vegetables at the time. And we'll convert the rest of the Everglades into a series of lakes. That was to compensate for the fact that water wasn't going south from Lake Okeechobee, it was going out the estuary. So everything tears off Lake Okeechobee and the Everglades agricultural area, and the need to send water out the St. Lucie and Caloosahatchee estuary, because that's how this water management system was designed. So if you're wondering, why does this keep happening over and over and over again, water coming out the St. Lucie and Caloosahatchee, that was the plan from the 1950s. To fix it, you have to replumb the entire system. So we took a system that looked like this, sheet flow flowing across the Everglades into Lake Okeechobee, and then spilling southward into one that today looks like this. Water goes out the estuaries, because that's the only place for it to go from Lake Okeechobee. And then there's lakes in the middle of the Everglades, and just at the very bottom of the system we have some surface flow, but not nearly enough water. Hence, the bottom end is starved for the water that is currently going past Roosevelt Bridge here. So the solution is really pretty straightforward. If I want to correct that, what I have to do is take a system that today looks like this, where water comes in from the north and then out to the estuaries. Very little of it goes south into one that looks like that. That is the comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan. That is really the only fix.
Well, it looks good.
So there's this plan called the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan, filled with 68 projects. It was approved by Congress and the state in 2000, 50-50 partnership. Original cost was $8 billion. Even that just converting has raised. But the problem is that on the federal side is each and every single one of those projects requires congressional action. First, the Corps and district water management have to plan it, and then that has to go to Congress and get approved. And things aren't moving very fast in Congress these days. And then after you approve it, then you just get into lists for money. So then you have to go and get the money. So that process has proven a very difficult uphill battle into implementing these projects. But the main elements are that of every restoration plan are really kind of simple. I have to clean the water so that before it gets to the wetlands, it doesn't poison them with nutrients. So I have to clean the water before it enters the wetlands. I then have to remove the features that block surface flow. Remember in the 1960s when they built all those dams in the Everglades, I can't just send it south without pulling those dams out. Otherwise it'll just pile up behind those dams and won't go anywhere. So projects like Tamiami Trail and others that remove dams in the Everglades are really important to Martin and Lee County because that is how we're going to be able to send that water where it needs to be. So next I have to remove the features that divert surface flow. All these canals in the Everglades are like short-circuiting the flow. Send it to where water managers want it to go rather than where it went historically. And next I have to build storage reservoirs to reproduce the effects of lost wetlands. There's now 8 million people living in South Florida. I'm not moving. I don't know about you. We've drained a lot of wetlands. Those wetlands historically acted like sponges. The lake didn't overflow every year. Just like you don't get these discharges every year. But, for example, today the Everglades Agricultural Area was all wetlands, more than 700,000 acres, that would contribute flow during years the lake didn't overflow. That's gone. The Everglades doesn't have a source of water anymore, because we've drained it all. So if I want to reproduce that flow during wet years, I have to reproduce it during dry years and take into account the effect of the lost wetlands. And then I need to build features that spread flow across the land surface. So how does this deal, how do you look at this from a 30,000-foot level on what we need to do? Well, I would just say, let's go back to that kind of diagram. We have to send it south. That's the solution. I mean, that's how it used to work. That's how we need to get it to work again. So we need to replumb our entire water management system, one of the largest in the country. That's not easy. It involves the government. They're not noted for their alacrity. This is a difficult, long process. But here's the idea. If I'm going to send water from the Lake Okeechobee back into where it used to go, I need to first build filtration marshes to clean it up. I don't know where else to put those except south of Lake Okeechobee, and that's in the Everglades Agricultural Area. There is no way to get the water from the Everglades, or from the lake to the Everglades, and clean it up without building something that does that in the Everglades Agricultural Area. For that, I need land. Next, I have to remove the dams in the Everglades. That's really important. There's a project called the Central Everglades Project that's awaiting authorization in Congress. Once we get authorization, we can then ask for money. But that's just sitting there. And those are as important as anything we do. If you want the water to leave the Everglades, once you send it there, you have to remove those dams. And lastly, we need to replace the wetlands, the storage from the lost wetlands south of Lake Okeechobee. Again, I don't know how to do that except in the Everglades Agricultural Area. That is going to provide the water. Once I remove the dams, it's like pulling the plug in a bathtub. If I don't have a source of water, they're going to dry up and we're going to be in the same fix they were in the 1930s that led to this whole water management system. So replacing that storage And then sending it to the Everglades when it's dry is a central part of getting this whole thing to work like it used to. It's not a matter of just getting it to work when it's wet. You also have to get it to work when it's dry. Restoration, the Everglades Restoration Plan is the solution. And that's what we need to do. So I was going to say this is pretty straightforward. I don't need to show you all the modeling results. I don't need to go over again and again to show the scientific proof. It is how it used to work. And if you wanted to get to work like that again, this is what you have to do. Undo those steps we took to get there. It's hard to be objective about this when, as a scientist, you're supposed to be objective, but it's really hard when you look out at a park near Roosevelt Bridge and see the black water. It's discouraging, disheartening. I live in the Keys. I live in Key Largo, and we're suffering the opposite problem. Last year we had no fresh water coming because of the dams in the Everglades, and there's been 40,000 acres of seagrass lost in Everglades National Park in my backyard. It's the obverse of the coin, that we didn't get the water you got in 2013. Remember that last disaster? Starving, that water should have gone to the Everglades, into Florida Bay in 2014 and 2015, but didn't. And we're suffering the consequences of that. So we're all kind of suffering the same problems. We have different manifestations of the same problem. You see black water going out under Roosevelt Bridge. Florida Bay sees a lack of fresh water, starved for water down in the south. So I just want to move there to look at what's happening today and give you some outlook or some perspective of what the situation looks like. This is kind of what it looked like, not this was the day before yesterday, but roughly speaking. I drove across from Sanibel yesterday and it was absolutely pouring rain, so this could be worse than this. That there's about 26,000 gallons per second coming in from north of Lake Okeechobee into the lake. That's gone down a lot in the last few weeks. And about 25,000 gallons per second going out the St. Lucie and 44,000 going on to Coosawhatchee. That's a lot of water. You see the effects of that out there today. So looking at the lake itself, this is the driver. It doesn't matter what's happening anywhere else in the system. The Lake Okeechobee schedule is what determines whether or not there's discharges to the St. Lucie and Coosawhatchee estuary. Why? Because that's how it was designed to work. The only outlet for high water levels in the lake, the only outlet built into this water management system, was to put it out the estuaries. That was a decision made a long time ago, and we can't change it until we build Everglades Restoration. So the lake is starting to come down. I don't know what it is this morning. It doesn't look like the rains have hit. So 16.02. Well, yeah, so it's falling. So the rains that fell yesterday haven't quite hit the lake. The outlook going forward is that it's supposed to continue to be an above average dry season. March, April, May are projected to be wetter than normal. That's not good news for Lake Okeechobee. But the summer, the wet season, is October, November, December is projected to be slightly below normal. Slightly. So this is a graph that keeps me up at night. And this is the projection, was done in early February, of what is the likelihood or percent chance that these discharges from the lake are going to continue. And you see it's almost certain that it's going to continue through March. Very high probability it's going to continue through May. Not necessarily maximum, but very high discharges. But what scares me the most is there's about a 50-50 chance this is going to continue for the rest of the year. If we have a very dry, below normal wet season, like we had in 2013 where it just stopped raining, the discharges may stop. If we get an average or above average, one tropical storm will push that into the above into the above normal releases. That's not good news. So the ecological projections for the estuaries, well, you know what's happening out there now. If there's a good chance it's going to continue for months, a very high probability it's going to continue for months, and a very 50-50 chance it's like rain in the summer. What's that going to do to seagrass and oyster habitat? Well, I don't need to tell you the outlook is not good. They've barely recovered from 2013. So the seagrass out in Indian River Lagoon will likely continue seeing lots of sediment load, dark water, black water blocking the light. Prognosis is not good. Same thing for the oyster beds out here on the main part of the river and in the North Fork. If and when they stop, news doesn't mean that the problem is over. We're quite likely to see algae blooms. Water will sit there. It's got lots of nutrients in it. You are likely to see beach microalgae, blue-green algae blooms because of the nutrients in these waters. Almost surely long-term fisheries impact when you lose that much seagrass and other things like that from these algae blooms, fish lesions. It's a familiar story, and I wish I had better news for you. So there's a lot of confusion about sending water south because water managers have heard you, and they know the solution is to send it south, and they're taking every opportunity to say, yeah, we're doing that. So recently there was a story that comes from the news press over in Fort Myers, but we took some actions to move water into Everglades National Park in a new way. So here's what basically happened. Today they're moving about 20,000 gallons through a narrow gap in one of the lakes, the Everglades National Park. That was the only outlet. And they took an action to move water from that lake in Conservation Area 3A into the eastern side of Everglades National Park, a new outlet. That's very good news if you're where I live in Monroe County, because that's more water that's going to Florida Bay, and it's going back into where historically it used to flow. Very, very good news, and I'm overjoyed. But the question is, does that mean that more water is flowing from Lake Okeechobee? Well, you can go look. How much water is flowing today from Lake Okeechobee toward the conservation areas? No flow, zero. There is no water moving from Lake Okeechobee down into the Everglades. The reason is the Everglades are already full. They're full for two reasons. They had a lot of rain, and secondly, all the water from the Everglades agricultural area was pumped very quickly into the Everglades, and they're reeling from the effect of that. We need to have some way of buffering that effect. When I lose wetlands for drainage, what you do is you move the water very, very quickly after it rains. A wetland didn't work like that. It would hold the water for a long time, release it later. So the Everglades is reeling from the effect of the drainage of the EAA and is trying to compensate or trying to overcome that first. The lake in 3A is about 1.5 feet higher than normal, which is as bad or high, almost near record highs in the Everglades. So what we need to do is get our elected officials back on the track of sending water south. There's a very good chance we could get a dedicated funding source, so please contact your state senator, Senator Negron, and it's already passed the House, but they have been big supporters of Legacy Florida Act, which dedicates at least $100 million a year to go and build the projects that send water south. They even wrote into the law to give priority to projects that send water south and relieve the estuary discharges. That's good news. Next, we need Congress to move on WRDA, which is the Water Resources Development Act, which authorizes the projects that begin to move water south. That's a very important step. This project starts to remove some of those dams and clean the water up before sending it south. And lastly, ask Governor Scott to support early implementation of these projects and to acquire land and treatment south of Lake Okeechobee.
You had said, Dr. Van Lint, that we don't have sacrificial Everglades, and I don't believe that anybody in this room thinks we have a sacrificial Indian River Lagoon or Police that
Exactly.
has estuary. So why do we not have a sacrificial EAA?
There you go.
That's not a science question.
Damn good question.
It is a very good question. I continually come back to, I don't know how to do Everglades restoration. That's solve Florida-based problems, the Everglades problems, St. Lucie, Caloosahatchee, without land in the EAA. I don't know how. So, and I haven't heard a plan that does do it without, the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan has storage. Doesn't have treatment in the EAA, but that's a different question. But it does have storage, it does have land in the EAA. We've used all the land we've bought in the EAA. We had bought 54,000 acres for storage. We've used that to clean up the pollution from the sugar fields. The land that Governor Christ bought in 2010, we've swapped for Governor Scott's plan to clean up the pollution from the EAA.
But the storage that you're talking about SERP and SEP having, a lot of it relies on ASRs, which have been shown to be not possible. So a lot of the storage that SERP and SEP take into account are ASRs, which we all know now that don't work. And Maggie Hirchala, who's a dear hero of mine, points out continuously to what appears to be a deaf audience that if ASR isn't working, and that's what we're relying on, then that plan is really just a pile of dog poop because it relies so heavily on ASR. And that's where we send the water into the ground and then pull it back up when sugar needs it.
It does, you are exactly right. The current plan has ASR as the solution. That can't happen. The technology may work, but the scale they envisioned is absolutely not possible. So it just means that the basic formula of sending more water south, removing more dams, adding more storage is going to have to be the consequence. It just makes the EAA even more important. So it was in the plan before. I now take out pieces like ASR. It just emphasizes the need for land in the EAA.
Thank you for being honest.